On today's video, we're going to talk about the top 10 most dangerous places in Alabama for 2023. Here's the problem. Alabama is refusing to report information about crime stats to the FBI, and whatever information they are reporting is very misleading. As an example, the police chief of Birmingham, Alabama, has gone on rants against reports of Birmingham, Alabama being the most dangerous city in the country. Birmingham had between 144 to 156 murders happen in 2022, and that doesn't include all of the workplace accidents and other things that happened that were homicides but were misreported as workplace accidents or roadside accidents. But let's take the low number of 144 murders. That still puts Birmingham as the #1 deadliest city in the United States. In comparison, Jacksonville, Florida, which has almost 5 times more population, had less murders, and Jacksonville, Florida is considered one of the murder capitals of the United States. What is there to dispute about that? At least 144 murders for less than 200,000 people. Jacksonville is almost approaching 1 million people in population, and they only had 129 murders. That's the most dangerous city in Florida. There's nothing to dispute. Birmingham, Alabama is the most dangerous city in the country, and the only reason Birmingham can be verified is because, at least for Birmingham, they were able to get most of the murders on paper. The problem with other towns that are smaller and that police corruption is even greater is that there's no real way of getting accurate information or any information out of these police departments. So there's no real way to know what the most dangerous places in Alabama are, because they're trying to cover up the information. Even the cities that are bigger, like Birmingham, where we're able to confirm the amount of murders, even in those cities, they're trying to cover it up or put out misleading articles or make rants and videos accusing people like Forbes and all these other magazines that saying their information is wrong. So if it's difficult to assert for a city like Birmingham what these crime rates are, imagine for the smaller places in Alabama. It's almost impossible. So what I can do is give you an idea of what the top 10 most dangerous places are by murder rates from previous years combined with my real life travels and reports from people on the ground in Alabama. The footage you're looking at now is from a video that I took off the internet, but basically me and my wife were sitting outside of a barbecue place in the town that we lived in Alabama, which was promoted as a safe and top-rated suburb of Montgomery. While we were eating outside of a barbecue restaurant, things started popping off and we had to hide behind vehicles to finish our meal. Where I was hiding from, there was a little crack which I was able to get you guys this footage from. But basically, having to duck behind structures and cars to finish your meal sounds like something out of living in a war zone. I later found out that this particular dispute was over 2 family clans that were feuding between each other in the town I lived in. The #1 most dangerous place in Alabama is Jefferson County, the Birmingham metro area. The entire urban core of Birmingham is dangerous. Some areas like Fairfield, Midfield, and Bessemer are having ridiculously high crime rates and really high murder rates as they report independently. For example, in the area of Bessemer, Hispanics have been killed in job sites. They were targeted randomly just for being Hispanics and for being working class people. While in most cities in the United States, the people being killed are mostly people that are involved in street activity, in Birmingham, Alabama, the criminals are targeting people like Hispanics and Asians who they believe are less likely to report to the police or if they are killed, less likely to be investigated by the police. Ineffective state laws like HB 56 means that the victims of homicides are many times not required to have the same services in the investigation process. There was outrage after a father of 7 was ambushed in the morning on his way to work and killed at the doorsteps of his home. Violence in Birmingham is completely out of control, and it stretches far beyond the city limits of Birmingham and stretches into other areas like Sylacauga, which, despite being on the outskirts, have reported increasingly high murder rates. While it is believed that most of the crime takes place within Birmingham city limits, anywhere in Jefferson County, you will have to exercise extreme caution if you are traveling. Many out-of-state travelers have reported that they are not only being targeted by criminals, but they're also being targeted by law enforcement. And using HB 56, vehicles with state tags out of Florida, California, or Texas are indiscriminately being targeted, as HB 56 takes away the rights of people who are immigrants and in the state of Alabama can be used in unconstitutional ways that are not allowed in other states. If you are traveling through the state of Alabama on your way somewhere else, you'll have to be very careful of the indiscriminate practices of law enforcement, in particular in the Birmingham area. Many people have also reported being run into by criminals right after contact with law enforcement. If you think this sounds scary, it is, because it really is. You should look at entering the city of Birmingham as you should look at crossing the border into Mexico. You're entering a place where law enforcement is corrupt, criminals have impunity, and anything can happen to you at any time. Number 2 is Mobile and Pritchard. Pritchard is a section of the city of Mobile that is not within city limits. This was done to prevent them from having resources of the city and to ensure that their crime statistics would not make Mobile look bad. But it is, in all practical purposes, within the city core of Mobile. If you find yourself in Mobile, Alabama, you should exercise caution, as in any large city. Beyond that, as it is one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Year after year, the murder rates for Mobile and Pritchard have been significant. However, in the last few years, the exact numbers have become ever and more obscure, and it is not exactly known exactly to what extent crime in Mobile has grown. But you should know that after 2020 and COVID, crime in Alabama grew significantly, and Mobile, Alabama had a huge increase in crime. Just like Birmingham, Alabama, it is really unclear to what extent crime is being covered up. Regardless, if you go by the minimal statistics that have been reported, you can assume that the Mobile area is very dangerous. The city is featured on the first 48, and seamlessly some of the crimes that happen in the city appear to be over absolutely nothing or insignificant sums of money. The city is also segregated, and there are racial tensions. In some areas of Mobile, like Pritchard, the city is not picking up garbage, and as you can see here, children's diapers, needles, tampons, all that either gets burned in fire pits or thrown to the side of the road. As you can see here, this is completely unsanitary. The city of Mobile has the lowest life expectancy of any city in the United States. Decades of segregation and hate led the city of Mobile to create interstate highways through the African American community to disenfranchise them economically. And to this day, the city limits of places like Pritchard follow under that same mindset of separating Black people and not allowing them to have access to resources like garbage collection. Number 3, the rural counties of Dallas, WILCOX, and Perry. This is traditionally the Alabama Black Belt. These are isolated areas that don't have interstate, many hospitality like restaurants or even hotels. It is an area you do not want to get trapped in or have to stay in overnight. As you can see here, the state of Alabama has not cared to put any roads in front of the school. Despite the state of Alabama having some of the best road networks in the country due to lack of bureaucracy, they have made sure that the roads in towns that have African American populations, and in particular in front of their schools or other public resources that are for African American communities, never get done. It will absolutely baffle you to drive through the entire state of Alabama on perfectly paved roads until you enter an area that is African American. One can understand that after being discriminated so much, the people that live in this region of Alabama have very little to be happy about with the racial tensions of the area. It is best that you do not travel through here, as the area has gone through some of the most discriminatory segregation and disenfranchisement from the economy, leaving the people here absolutely angry at the situation. If you're traveling through Alabama, you should do your best to avoid this entire region, especially at night. Due to the obvious problems that exist in the state of Alabama, racial tensions here are very high. Going through this region of Alabama today is like taking a step back into time and being put in the South in the 1960s. The ideology of segregation and the resentment of people, distrust and hostility of outsiders makes this one of the most inhospitable places you'll find in the United States. Getting out at a restaurant or a gas station can be met with very passive-aggressive behavior that you'll most likely misinterpret for bad service, but can actually turn dangerous if you don't understand the situation. Whether black or white, the people in this region of Alabama believe in segregation, and if you enter a restaurant or a business that you're not supposed to enter, it can cause quite the commotion. And I know this might sound hard to believe to the rest of us that live in the civilized world, but I will tell you, if you find yourself in this rural part of Alabama, it is best to avoid it completely. A simple situation like a flat tire, a vehicle repair, or running out of fuel in a place like this can become into a nightmare. Some of the towns in this region, like Uniontown and Camden, have some of the highest murder rates that have ever been recorded in the United States. If you're traveling through the United States and not using interstate highways, this would be an area of the country that you most definitely would want to avoid. As the smallest gesture while eating at a restaurant or getting fuel can turn into a heated racial tension situation, whether dealing with the area's extremely high crime rate or the hostilities of the residents towards outsiders or people of other races. This is definitely a part of the country you do not want to find yourself in. Law enforcement might as well be non-existent here. As you can see, they don't pave the roads in front of schools. What makes you think you're going to have law enforcement come out to handle some type of civil dispute with somebody? Many people in rural Alabama who do reach out to law enforcement as victims of a crime find that they will most likely be fined by the police officer responding to the call, have their vehicle deemed as unsafe to be on the roads, and then towed away when they go to get their vehicle recovered and they don't know where it's at. Endless nightmare stories coming out of this region of Alabama. Horrific area to travel through. Number 4, Elmore County, in particular the rural regions. This county is known to have several hate groups documented. I'm not going to elaborate on the details, but there are websites on the internet where you can get more information. Some of the cities in this county have high murder rates, and when you enter the rural regions, it is really no man's land. People in this part of Alabama have a strong sentiment against outsiders, in particular Hispanics, Asians, and anyone from the northern region of the country. Alabama Confederate country, and a few places like Titus and the small town of Elmore are places, if you're an outsider, you'll probably have to check in with somebody that's from the area. These are areas with no phone signal, and if you have a problem and need to call the law, most likely the law is going to be related to the people that are perpetrating the crime, which means they're not going to be on your side. Many people here work in prisons, and smuggling contraband into these prisons is one of the major sources of income for these people. Inmates in the Alabama prison system are commonly found to have social media accounts and post up all types of videos about their life within the prisons. And many of the murders committed on the streets of Alabama are believed to be inmates that are released to commit those hits. Corruption in the good old boy system is the only real power that exists in these rural parts of Elmore County. Many times the criminal syndicates here are very strong, and while law enforcement may have good intentions, they're afraid to take their jobs home with them and prefer to just play it safe, staying out of most civil disputes, especially when family clans are part of the culprit. Vice News recently published a video about the Millbrook Police Department, which is in Elmore County, that vividly exposes how corrupt this part of the state is. The video is mostly about an African American male who was killed by a police officer, and then the murder of that person was put on his accomplice. While there are state laws that provide for this to happen, it is believed that within the context of how this murder was committed, it was the police officer who should have been charged with murder, not the other criminal. The criminal that was killed was running away and posed absolutely no safety hazard to the police officers. Nonetheless, he was shot, killed, and his death was put on his accomplice as they broke into a home in rural Elmore County. The law in this region does whatever it wants, and if you for any reason are on the wrong side of the law, there's nothing preventing them from ruining your life. Anyone wanting more information on Elmore County or the Millbrook Police Department, you're welcome to go on the internet and research it. You'll find many particular incidents that will back up these accounts. Some of the family clans in Elmore County are so powerful that even law enforcement refuses to open up a case against particular families. If the person that you are trying to report as a criminal is part of one of these large family clans, the responding police officers will be afraid to let you file a report on them. It's what you call the good old boy system. Everything I said about Elmore County is present in Chilton County, except for here, it's possibly even more backwards and more isolated. Even most of the parks in this county are just Confederate memorials. It's like Mississippi burning, but in real life. Elmore County has a lot of problems, but at least it doesn't have rampant meth and drug use. You'll find a lot more rampant drug use in this part of Alabama. Meth and moonshine are two big commodities out here. You'll also run into a lot of people that are actually and quite literally inbred, similar to what you'll find in Kentucky or West Virginia. Isolated, hostile to outsiders. This is definitely a region of Alabama you should probably just avoid. This is where you'll find a giant Confederate flag next to Interstate 65 before you approach Montgomery. One day I was sitting outside of a pawn shop right before I left Alabama, and I had a very charismatic man in this county, and I told him all my hate and frustration that I had for Alabama and why I was leaving the area, and he told me some hilarious stories about him going to court in this county. Basically, the man told me he had some incriminating issues with the local judge, and every time he went to court, they just dismissed his cases. His pickup truck was riddled with several different types of bullets. His stories were hilarious, and his warnings about what I should and should not do in this area were very accurate. You'll meet some great people in these parts of Alabama who have absolutely no problem telling you how things really work. And to be honest, a lot of times the guy that sells the moonshine and has a big beard and looks like he's got the overalls, that guy might be more likely to put you on game, they'll keep you alive in these parts of Alabama, than a police officer or a county official. At the end of the day, the reason I'm still alive today isn't because of police officers or city officials in places like Alabama where I lived. It was good old people with overalls and an old beat up truck that gave me the warnings that kept me alive and told me the do's and don'ts of rural Alabama. Shelton County is definitely a place you want to tread lightly as you cruise through Interstate 65. There's a lot of big wigs lying in their pockets real good. It'd be a shame if you got in the way. Number 6 is Montgomery, Alabama. Perhaps when you hear the words Montgomery, beautiful things come to mind like Rosa Parks, Nat King Cole, the Civil Rights Movement. The recent murder rate here was 43 out of 100,000. The city is for the most part segregated. If you're lucky, your experience here will just be some bad customer service. But that bad customer service eventually gets to get very old very quickly, as the people here are very passive aggressive. There's a lot of resentment in Montgomery and hate for people of other races. If you're Hispanic or Asian, you could easily be victimized for the reasons we've already mentioned in other cities as well. People will outright pull guns on you to enforce segregation here on the worst day. If you are on the wrong side of the segregation law and you are robbed, don't expect law enforcement to help you. The first thing they're going to tell you is, why aren't you on this side of town? You shouldn't be here. That's why you got robbed. One of the most dangerous cities in the United States with some of the most miserable poverty. You'll find that not even schools have air conditioning units. Many have busted out windows that are just covered with plywood. This is a violent, hateful, and very angry city that you should avoid at all costs. While visiting the civil rights memorials, you'll find peddlers trying to sell you things, others begging, and yet even other people telling you that the civil rights movement was a complete lie and that their version of what happened is most accurate. They don't respect their own city's heritage. What makes you think they're going to respect you, an outsider? It's best to always be armed in the city, as it is an open carry state, and many times criminals will point at you to see if you have it on you, and if you don't have it on you, you'll probably make a very nice gift package for somebody. Despite the city being over 70% black, only about 2% of businesses are black owned. Home ownership here is relatively high. However, you can get a house for like $5,000 to $10,000, so that's not really a huge achievement. Due to racial tensions and local people politicking at their workplaces, something as simple as getting a Starbucks at a drive-thru in this metropolitan area can take as much as 45 minutes to an hour. And pack it up before it gets dark, especially on Friday night. As soon as the sun goes down, the fireworks start going off. Even the Hank Williams Memorial isn't safe. Country music singer Ryan Upchurch was going to film a music video at this site, which is one of the city's most important historical landmarks. He reported a running incident of some sort with law enforcement and shootouts right in the footsteps of this monument. He had to evacuate the location. He later uploaded a video saying Hank is in the hood. He is the only YouTuber with more than 2 million subscribers who's ever left a comment on my channel. Apparently he got a little curious about the streets of Montgomery after his little incident. Number 7 is CULLMAN County. While the city of CULLMAN brags that it's one of the safest places to live in Alabama, that's only for white people. It was a sundown town until recently. Hispanics, Asians, and blacks traveling through this area or working here at a distribution center, which cannot get staffed locally, so they have to bring people from other places, have reported getting followed from their job sites and other types of weird encounters. This is a great safe area, but only for whites. Anybody else that moves into this area or even comes here to work can encounter all types of weird crap. And of course, since law enforcement's in on it, there's no way to report it. How can you have crime when it doesn't exist? Interesting question. Don't let the crime rates online fool you. This part of Alabama is absolutely dangerous, and while on paper it might seem like it's safe, if you're an outsider traveling through the area, it is possibly best for you to stay alert and very suspicious. There's a lot of work in this area, and many of the workers are temporarily coming from other states. I've talked to a lot of them, and they're telling me all types of scary stories that they lived in the Cullman County area. In fact, it is very safe for the people who live here and are from here. It's you, the outsider, traveling through here, or person from another part of the country, especially if you're an immigrant that gets transferred to this part of Alabama, who will have to be extraordinarily careful. Many people have noted that they're immediately pulled over, taken to court, fined, and an endless legal process begins. Right outside of Cullman County is a little town called Empire, Alabama. If you go to Google or YouTube right now and just write Empire, Alabama, artist called Kid Suda, a song called Shake That Bottle, aka the Alabama National Anthem. It's just a nice little town right outside of Cullman County. Might give you another perspective on this region that isn't the one their tourist department's putting out. I don't eat, I don't sleep. All I do is tweak and geek and shake that bottle in Empire, Alabama, right outside of Cullman County. So yeah, it's safe for the good old boys that live here, but it's not safe for you. Number 8 is Anniston, Alabama. While my claims for Cullman, Alabama are going to have a hard time finding hard evidence, well, there's no reason to doubt my claim for Anniston, Alabama. It has the cheapest real estate in the entire country, maybe because nobody wants to live here. They also have the highest crime rate in the whole country a few years back until they stopped reporting it, so now it doesn't exist. So how can you have high crime rate when it doesn't exist? So right before their crime rate mysteriously disappeared, they did have the highest crime rate in America, hand in hand with the lowest real estate value. So that makes sense. If a place is dangerous, chances are the houses there aren't going to be worth anything. The only person surprised by this whole thing is the people that live here. Apparently, they're not aware that having the cheapest real estate in the country and the highest crime rate is a bad thing. In fact, they're not even aware any of this stuff exists. As far as they know, they're living in a perfect small little town that just lost a couple jobs. Bless their heart. For the rest of us, stay the crap out of Anniston, Alabama. It's dangerous. It sucks. In 2016, they had 7 murders, even though their population was only like 22,000, and 730 violent attacks. That means like 1 in 20 people in this town was violently attacked, and then the rest were murdered. That's ridiculously high crime rates. And again, they're not publishing his stuff anymore. You can't really readily get statistics for Alabama, but if you could, crime rates have only gone up since 2016. I mean, they were going up all the way up to 2020, and then in 2020, the world went crazy, so you know for a fact the crime rates were even higher. And then all of a sudden, as Alabama becomes the most dangerous place in the country, they're like, oh, hold on, we can't report this stuff because it didn't happen. Then a bunch of YouTubers and magazines said, no, it did happen. And then the sheriff's offices were like, no, sir, it didn't happen. And we're going to arrest you if you say it did for lying about us. Lying through your tooth is a crime in Alabama. We're just going to make it up right now. A town of 22,000 people with 7 murders. Yeah. Number 9 is Coosa County. There's not really anything in this county, and that's the problem. I knew somebody in Millbrook, Alabama who was from Coosa County, and he lived in Millbrook and told me he would never go back to Coosa County because of how scary it was. I'm like, hold on, you live here and you think that was scary? So I actually went there myself. And as you can see, it's absolutely scary. Not only is the place backwards, isolated, barely has any towns of any decent size, it's also prone to a lot of tornadoes. The only thing you're going to find in this county that will show up on Google Maps are gun clubs, Baptist churches, and cemeteries, which are mostly Confederate cemeteries. If you're an outsider, you're best staying out of this county. I found one house in this county that was so affordable. I couldn't believe how cheap it was. They had a lot of land and everything. So I took it to the person that was from this county. I was like, yo, dude, look at this. Hey, aren't you from this county over here? Look how cheap real estate over there. He just looked me blankly in the eyes and said, boy, do you want to die? Perhaps the most prestigious establishment in this county is a Piggly Wiggly. You'll do good to avoid this rural part of Alabama, and despite the fact it's rural, it does have really high murder rates. I don't know if these are disputes over who gets to marry a sister or a cousin, but regardless, it's another one of those regions in Alabama that if you're an outsider, you'll do best to stay the crap out. The roads here really don't lead anywhere great. Number 10 is Phenix City, and yes, they don't know how to spell their name of their own city. This city was notoriously a mob town back in the day. There's actually great documentaries on Phenix City from back in the day on YouTube if you want to learn more about this place. But it hasn't changed much. It's possibly worse now than it was back then. Where do you even start to talk about the problems with Phenix City? Well, for one, they have a huge number of government housing right in the core of their city. That's never good. Then they're on the state line of Georgia. The city of Columbus, Georgia, on the other side is one of the most dangerous cities in the state of Georgia. And they have a lot of suburbs there as well on the outskirts. And the people in that city have a nice little desire for illicit products that are most readily available in Alabama. Since there's more corruption, these illegal substances are more readily available on the Alabama side, so most of the dealers on the Georgia side cross over into Alabama or have somebody else cross the border for them to retrieve the illegal substances to bring them back to Georgia, where the law enforcement is not as strict, but they're more readily looking for these illicit items. So Phenix City has become almost like a middle post between the dealers on one side of the state line and on the other, and this has created like a crime market where it's just like back in the day, Phenix City was a crime city where the rules on each state are different, the law enforcement's different, and people were able to find a little loophole or something that conveniently works for them. Whatever the situation, there's runners running back and forth today just like there were back in the days of the mob. Phenix City is nothing more than just a middle ground for traffickers. And the city also has red light cameras. Yeah, got a ticket in the mail for that. That was my welcome to Alabama present when I moved to Alabama. Well, the first time I crossed in Alabama, I crossed through the Florida line. The second time I went back in, I went to the Georgia line, and boom, in the mail, a ticket from Phenix City, Alabama on one of their red light cameras. At the end of the day, it's a corrupt, and as I said, as I got the ticket, I just read more about the city and found out how corrupt and backwards and all the horrible things that were happening here. It hasn't really changed much. It's one of the worst places you can live in Alabama. There are like quote-unquote suburbs with new houses on the outskirts of Phenix City. When I was moving to Alabama, you can get a brand new construction for like under $100,000. Yeah, that seems very affordable. But like always, when something's affordable, what's the quote? There's a reason. Not only does this town's history just pretty much comes down to a mob town, even today, the fact it's on the border continues to provide great opportunities for criminals. We drove through late at night and saw people burning garbage barrels in their backyard. It was the first of the month, I think, so they were just gearing up to get their food stamps and party hard for the first 3 days of the month. You can also go water rafting between both states if you have even less regard for your life. So as you exit Columbus, you may find yourself hearing people screaming. Some of them are right in the middle of the state lines rafting between both states. The other ones are screaming because they've entered the state of Alabama and are terrified for their lives. Despite being a small town, in the year 2016, they reported 8 murders to the FBI. That's quite a bit for a town that small. And that would also contradict the stories of the residents who I've lived here my whole life and I ain't never seen nothing like that happen. They also had a shockingly high number of another horrendous crime that starts with the letter R that we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube. That's unsettling. If it's not unsettling to you, it's very unsettling to me. So if you find a house on Realtor.com for $50,000 that's brand new and there's just a few bloodstains on the wall and you're wondering, yeah, it's probably just a raccoon or something. No, it wasn't a raccoon. Don't buy it. It's scary. Alright everybody, so those are the top 10 most dangerous places in Alabama that you should definitely avoid, because the state of Alabama is trying to cover up that they are now one of the most dangerous states in the country. Possibly Mississippi and Louisiana are now far behind Alabama in crime rates. I wouldn't doubt it. They're trying to cover it up as much as they can. Unfortunately, for the rest of us, we're just going to have to kind of guess where these areas are having the most problems are in Alabama, because they're not doing anything to help us find the truth about what's going on in this state. They're trying to cover it up, and most likely the reason they're trying to cover it up is because now Alabama is probably worse off than Louisiana and Mississippi, the states that they were competing with for the highest crime rates. Even if you were not opinionated on this topic, when the police chief of Birmingham wants to criticize and say that Birmingham's not the most dangerous city, that the Forbes list is, they're making it up and they're not credible. And to some degree, I do agree. Forbes is not as credible as they used to be. But there's one factor in this whole equation that's undisputable, is that the city of Birmingham reported a minimum of 144 murders. That in itself makes it the most dangerous city in the country. What else do you have to dispute at that point? I mean, regardless, it's not even a secret now that a lot of the communities that are being targeted by criminals, the police is not taking their police reports. So the actual crime stats of robberies and assaults and all that, property theft, all that's going to be completely messed up. I mean, people in Alabama are not even resorting to making police reports when they have something stolen now. They're just going on social media and putting out personal boundaries, or wanted is a stolen $5,000 reward. And they're just handling these types of crimes on their own means, because they don't trust law enforcement, especially within minority communities. So who knows what the crap is really going on in Alabama. Clearly, they're trying to cover up the situation. And if you're traveling through the state of Alabama, just know that it's a lot more dangerous than it really seems. Crime's been increasing, and the way law enforcement just trying to cover up these things means there's no relief in sight. Usually, if you're going to take on a problem head on and change it and make things better, the first thing you got to do is admit there's a problem. If you're trying to cover up a problem, there's no intentions to fix it. Alright guys, so that is the situation in Alabama, and those are 10 areas of Alabama that I would personally be extraordinarily careful if I were going through Alabama. On all of these online lists that I found, Huntsville was always towards the top, but those crime rates for Huntsville are possibly very accurate and depict the actual real life situation in Huntsville. I've never once in Huntsville felt scared or seen anything that would worry me. There's a few rough pockets and homeless camps in Huntsville, but it's nothing that you should worry about. I know when you look at analytics for Huntsville, it's always towards the top. It's not good statistically. I'm not saying Huntsville is great statistically. It's not. It's one of the worst cities statistically, but at least it's accurate. It never really got through my head as I lived in the Montgomery area, and I've traveled a lot to Huntsville, how Huntsville always had higher crime rates than Montgomery. Anybody who's from Alabama knows that doesn't sit right. How? So that just give you an idea. If before the 2020 thing, Huntsville always had higher crime rates than Montgomery, that right there was kind of a red flag that perhaps places like Montgomery aren't really accurately tracking their crime. And again, why would you even report it? When I was in Montgomery, if you hear somebody popping off in Huntsville, somebody's going to call the cops and file a police report. Dude, you hear somebody popping off in Montgomery, it's just another Friday night. So it's at what point do crime analytics really make sense? There's a few times, with murder rates, those are undisputable. But then you have a city like Birmingham where they have the highest murder rate in the country. But then there's no other crime here. That's just a bunch of people got whacked, but we're safe in all the other crime. Come on, bro. That's not really believable. At the end of the day, Alabama remains easily within the top 3 most dangerous states. And if you're driving through that state, you should probably stick to just Huntsville, the nicer side of Birmingham, maybe Fultondale or somewhere like Hoover or somewhere in Shelby County. Don't get too far off into the backwoods towns because they have some stuff going on there you don't want to be a part of. Baldwin County is relatively safe. The city of Auburn is relatively safe. And of course, Tuscaloosa, if you stick to the newer, fancier areas, you'll be okay. Around Florence and that area up there doesn't seem too bad. But if you're around the central part of the state, the areas that we talked about predominantly, like central Alabama, anything that was on this list, very bad places that you definitely need to be alert in. Baldwin County, a lot of people are moving there. Huntsville, a lot of people are moving there. Some people are falsely claiming that Huntsville is one of the best cities in the country to move to. I'm not going to tell you it's the worst because it's not, but it's definitely not on the best list. The state of Alabama needs people to work. Alabama is a state that, if you go back to the days of cotton, the reason Alabama and Mississippi where all this civil rights stuff took place and the reason that all the Civil War stuff took place is because it's the most productive land in the country. Okay, Alabama was the richest state antebellum period, Civil War period, because it's the most productive land in the country. That's why people are still fighting over that land, because it's so productive. Now, Alabama continues to be a very productive state, but the people there are just not good labor force. They're trying to bring in people to these Alabama cities from other places to see if they can get a more dependable labor force, because Alabama is a very productive place, but the people are very unproductive. The only way they can get people to move to Alabama is if they somehow mislead them to think that they're moving somewhere great. These big companies know that Alabama is a perfect place, from the land being very productive to being centrally located within the kind of center of the population of the United States. Is very accessible from there. There's pretty good road networks coming out of Birmingham north into Nashville. That's been like the hub of transportation going all the way back to the 1800s. Not to mention that the area north of the Tennessee River in Alabama is practically red clay. So you have all the materials you need to build houses and buildings and roads right there. Like everything that you need to make construction happen of new homes, from the lumber to the red clay dirt, is all right there. It's a perfect place to create a city affordably, but they can't get a good labor force. That's why they're trying to convince you to move there. Don't be their guinea pig. Hey man, as soon as 2020 thing kicked off, I sold my house in South Florida. I moved to Alabama. I sold my house on literally a day in a year. As soon as I get past the tax thing, I sold the house and got the crap out of there. I was literally in Alabama for 1 year and 1 day. As soon as I got into that tax bracket where I could sell my house and not have to lose it all to taxes, I sold the house and got the crap out of that place. In fact, I had even moved out before that point because we were like scared to be in our house because there are so many people trying to hurt us. Like, they had an opportunity to prove to me, a YouTuber, that this was a place worth moving to, and they made me live the nightmare of a lifetime. Years later, I'm still traumatized and filled with hate because of what they did to me there. So that should just give you an indication of the type of place Alabama is. And the statistics don't lie. Birmingham, Alabama is literally the most dangerous city in the country, surpassing St. Louis, surpassing Detroit by percentages. Yet their police chief goes on to say that, oh, this is just all a big misunderstanding. We wouldn't do something like that. No, it's not a misunderstanding, dude. And what's even scarier is that that's just what they reported. That doesn't include all the quote-unquote accidents, car accidents, and other mysterious things that people are on the internet every single day saying, hey, my family member disappeared. The last person that saw them was a police officer or a freaking EMS. Are you kidding me? Hey, if you saw this video, you've been warned. When I moved to Alabama, absolutely nobody warned me. And this list is the best thing that I could come up with because usually I have statistics for every video that I do. Alabama's trying to withhold information from you guys. And there's a good reason why. They're on track to being the absolute most dangerous state, and all their efforts to cover up what they're doing is not going unnoticed. Forbes magazine was the first one to say, hey, this crap ain't right. These two cities in Alabama are on the list. Let me tell you, Montgomery and Huntsville escaped the Forbes list because their populations are under 200,000 so far. Huntsville is going to hit their list because their new population for Huntsville will be over 200,000. But now Birmingham's population is shrinking, so they'll be below the 200,000. That's another angle they're going out with, saying they're not, whatever. Huge mess. Stay the crap out of Alabama. These places are dangerous and backwards, and the people that are moving here are definitely being misled.